Cool. So I will make sure my talk does not cut into lunchtime, because if I take away from Scott's Pokemon Go time, I hesitate where they'll find my corpse. So anyway, who am I? I'm not normally in .NET circles, so I'm going to actually go into this. I'm a developer evangelist for a company called Auth0. I'm an Austinite. So Austin's a lot like Portland, except the weather is worse, and y'all's lieutenant governor, actually I found out y'all don't have a lieutenant governor, but if y'all did, they would not be under indictment for securities fraud. Anyway, I'm a cat parent. That's Arya being a detention person cat. I'm genderqueer. Scott thankfully used my preferred pronoun of they, and yes, you can ask me about it. I won't, be mad. More narcissism. I am a pun master, and I love JavaScript. You could even say I'm enameled with it. I love the mix of laughs and groans. That was perfect. I'm a NodeBots author, addict, and scientist. I do a lot of robotics work in my spare time. And related to that, I am an electrical engineering student at Arizona State University Online. I'm going for my second bachelor's degree, because when the robots finally do uprise against their human masters, I want to be killed last. So, how I ended up here is kind of a funny story. So as a developer evangelist, I get told, hey, we're going to this conference. They want a speaker. Go do this. And so they said, you're speaking at a .NET conference in 10 days, which was 10 days ago today. And I said, that's great. I love this part of my job, pulling down things that I haven't used in a long time and starting them. So I have a Mac, as you can see. And I already use Visual Studio Code. Even though I wasn't using .NET, you use a lot of Node, and Visual Studio Code is really great with Node. So I actually was already using Visual Studio Code. So that part was fairly easy. So I figured, okay, I'm going to go look at the .NET docs site, see what has changed since the last time I used it. And what's core again? I'd heard about it, but I hadn't done anything with it. And I'd started a download immediately of a VM to start coding in, because, I thought .NET, I need Windows, right? And about 85% into the download of 20 gigs, I'm staring in Slack going, all right, I'm in the random channel because I'm just waiting for this download to go. And one of my coworkers goes, Core runs on a Mac, right? Like, you can actually just not have a VM. And then they showed me a tutorial, and then I downloaded the tutorial, tried it, and I realized I didn't need a VM. So I will not be using a VM today. I will be running everything natively on my Mac, so that's pretty cool. So now you're asking yourself, wait, you just said you have been doing .NET for 10 days after a 5-year break. Why should we listen to you on OAuth and OpenID Connect in .NET Core? Well, while I've only been using .NET Core for 10 days, I have read all of these specifications in full, repeatedly highlighted, annotated, understood. I know a lot about OAuth and a lot about OIDC, and feel free to ask me about any of those things today. And I was a .NET developer in a previous life. My first conference talk ever was actually at a Pablo's Fiesta in Austin, Texas, about using Grunt with .NET. So there you go. So I hear this a lot. I talk to people about identity and authentication, and I hear, oh, this is terrible. It's just, I don't want to do it. I love how the title says 2 things, and then there's 3 things. Hey, the 2 difficult things in programming, right? Naming things, scopes, and off by 1 errors. So anyway, the 3 things that contribute to this are a lack of knowing what OAuth is supposed to do versus what you're trying to do with it, missing context on the history of OAuth, the fact that there's an OAuth 1 and an OAuth 2, and the misunderstandings between those 2 specifications. So I'm going to go into a little bit of that. As for the history of OAuth, there's OAuth 1 and there's OAuth 2. OAuth 1 actually is a pain to implement because it requires signed certificates in order to exchange the username and password for an identity. It is very difficult to implement. However, it is still used by a lot of identity platforms. OAuth 2 is a lot easier to use for developers, and also it accounts for more than just computer, browser, server. Like the typical web application. And that wasn't a short-sighted move by the OAuth 1 authors. The problem wasn't that. The problem was just when OAuth 1 was written, that was what existed. You went into a browser that went to a website that connected to a server. Like, that was it. So OAuth 2 says, okay, there's like a litany of devices and a litany of platforms and a litany of ways to log in. We need to account for all of these and make the specification extensible so when more of these come up, we can add to it. So OAuth 2 did a lot of things. The one thing it did that was very divisive was it no longer required signatures or certificates to prove that either the source or the provider was who they said they were. Instead, we got bearer tokens, which were added in OAuth 2. And those are kind of like a little ticket. And if you have it, you're invited to the party. That's cool. They don't check your ID anymore after that, once you have that token. And that made a lot of people wary, because you want to make sure that there's no man in the middle or anything like that going on. So we want verification that the token comes from a trusted source. Luckily, we now have JSON Web Tokens, which are used in OAuth 2 and can be used in OAuth 2 and are required to use in OpenID Connect. And it mitigates the lack of signatures by being signed. So you can sign a JWT, in fact, you have to sign a JWT, and then your consumer can verify that the token came from you. You can verify the token came from them. We kind of re-added signatures back into OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. Whoa, whoa, JWT, what is that? What's a JSON Web Token? The very quick explanation, it is a token that consists of a header, a payload, and a key. The header and the payload are JSON objects, so pretty much language universal. There's a JSON library for just about every language. The key is the header concatenated with a period, concatenated with a payload, signed with a secret. The secret can be symmetric, HS256 signature, or it can be asymmetric, RS256 signature, public-private key. There's quite a few algorithms that are supported. If you want to learn more about JWTs, jwt.io has a lot of information, and it's RFC 7519 if you want to learn more and read a specification. So back to OAuth. You care about OAuth as a developer because managing usernames and passwords for your own application is a pain, is a huge pain point from an implementation standpoint, from a security standpoint, from a deployment standpoint, from an availability standpoint. Keeping databases with usernames and passwords is just, especially for a lot of smaller companies, not worth it. Especially because you are then liable if those passwords get out, right? So OAuth tends to be a very good solution for just getting logins going without having to store your own information. And the last part is, when you think about your app, you have to think, will users care enough to create a totally new, secure, because of course it is, password for your application? No, probably not. But they'll log into Twitter or Facebook or Google or any of the things they already log into. So the problem with provider implementations of OAuth is some OAuth platforms only use 1.0 still, even though OAuth 2 has been out for a long time. Some use both because that's totally not confusing. Some use both at the same domain and don't version them, which is super great. And some people expect every OAuth implementation to return the same user identity, which is one of the biggest problems with OAuth. Before we go further into the problems, we're going to talk about a little bit of vocabulary, because these three words tend to get turned into synonyms when they're not quite synonyms. So when I talk about authentication, I'm talking about a user proving they are who they say they are, by entering their username or password, by giving their fingerprint for Touch ID, by entering a token from their two-factor authentication device. That is authentication. Authorization is allowing an authenticated user to complete an action. So once you've authenticated yourself, your app then authorizes you to do things. And your identity is the information we know about you as a user, your username, your surname, your given name, all those things. So the problems with OAuth, and I put this in quotes because it's less of a problem with OAuth and more of a problem how we as developers have been using OAuth. Well, it just does authentication, but that's what it was designed to do. But we've shoehorned it into identity, and that's not what it was designed to do. So yeah, when you shoehorn something to do something that it's not supposed to do, you're going to end up with problems. And then the other problem is it's so hard to use. Not really. There are SDKs for just about every web language out there. And I'm pretty sure you just heard that from someone you admire or respect and just, agreed with them to sound smart. And I know this because I did that. For the first 2 years of my development career, I was like, oh, OAuth is awful. And when asked why, I'd be like, well, come on, it's awful, right? No, think about it. So the real problem, like I said, is that we've shoehorned OAuth to be an identity solution when it is not. It is an authentication solution. And so, as it always is and always will be on the web, if there is not a specification for something, we will end up with 50 different specifications, which are really, because I said so, of what user identity is and means. It's username from Google, for example, but it's user.name from Facebook, and it's user-name from Twitter, and you're trying to just get everybody to be able to log in and get their identity merged, right? That can be a real problem if you're trying to integrate multiple social platforms, especially if you're trying to aggregate user data. I forgot to switch slides. This was the slide I meant to be on for that little piece of information. Like I said, yeah, they name the tags differently, and if you want to add different social providers, you have to remap them to your current user models, and this can lead to a bunch of spaghetti code in different places for different providers. And sometimes if they change a version, they might have changed a field name, so your app no longer collects the last name correctly, but you're not aware of it until someone files a usability bug. So this is where OpenID Connect comes in. OpenID Connect started as OpenID authentication, and it became an ID wrapper around OAuth 2. So this basically is to solve the problem of, okay, everybody has a different definition of identification on the web, and we're getting closer and closer to the point where you will have 1 or 2 usernames and passwords for just about everything you use. So we need a way to standardize the identity around that concept. Right, but what is it? A simple identity layer built on top of OAuth 2 is what the OpenID.net thing says. Right, but what does that mean? So this is a diagram of what OIDC is supposed to be. So minimal is core, right? We'll talk a little bit more about these layers. And then you've got dynamic, which is discovery and dynamic client registration. And then you've got complete, which is session management and form post response mode. And then you've got underpinnings, which is all the specifications that are a part of OpenID Connect, including, as I mentioned, JWTs. And lots of JW various letters. Okay, that doesn't look simple. That does, no. But it does make things simpler. That diagram turns into some very interesting concepts. So core on its own doesn't do terribly much to help developers implement identity. However, dynamic is where things get interesting. So dynamic is a specification that says, at this URL, under your authority domain, you will have a JSON object that gives the user, being you, all of the URLs necessary to provide a user identification, including your token endpoint, your authorization endpoint, and your user info endpoint. So instead of magic stringing all the URLs that you're using for authentication in your application, because the specification exists, you can now say, okay, I know Google's authority is here, so I know that their configuration document is here, so I can get all the URLs I need to log someone into Google, even if they change it overnight, because they meet that specification. If they change the URL, they have to change the discovery document. So that's where things get useful with OpenID Connect. And not just for identity, but for authentication. If you want to log in with OAuth 2, their OAuth 2 endpoints are in that discovery document. So even if you don't want to use the ID part, if you just want to use the authentication, OpenID Connect can still be useful to you. So the dynamic client registration is, if you've ever gone to let people log into Google, you have to go to their API keys dashboard, and you have to sign up your application and click a bunch of forms. And dynamic client registration allows you to do this programmatically. It allows you to send a post request to a specific route and say, okay, this is my app name, this is what it's used for, these are the scopes I need. And it returns you your app ID and your app secret. Not a lot of providers have implemented this yet, but it is part of the specification, so that's pretty cool. That'll be pretty awesome when more providers are running it. Session management specifications are kind of intended to, they're still in draft mode, so I'm trying to figure out what their intent is. But from what I can tell, their intent is to say, like, okay, let's create a universal session for OpenID Connect. So if we want people to log in cross-platform, we can have that session be similar across platforms, which could be good, could be bad, depends on if you're a developer or security expert. Okay, so what's different? So like I said, instead of pre-programming the URLs, you grab the discovery document and use the URLs in that document. So if they put out a new version of the OAuth, of their OAuth endpoints and they change the URL, your application doesn't need to change its code because it's using the discovery document to pull in those URLs. You authenticate with OAuth like usual, and you get back in a JWT ID token. And you can validate the signature of that JWT to make sure that the provider that you wanted sent back that token. And then you can use this token to obtain more user information from the OAuth provider, depending on the scopes that you ask for, like Google. Google does implement OIDC. I think they are dynamic. I'm not sure if they are complete, but I know they're dynamic. Okay, so to recap in a few sentences, we use OAuth 2 to authenticate users, and we use OpenID Connect to gain information about their identity, which you use in your app to authorize them to do things. So to go back to that vocabulary lesson, we've got the authentication, the identity, and the authorization. So how does this work in .NET Core? Middleware everywhere. As an Express fan, really happy with the whole middleware situation going on. So we have a few packages that we're going to use. I have some demo code to show you here in a bit. ASP.NET or ASP.NET.security.OAuth. One of my coworkers, Jerry, contributes to this library, and one of the many benefits of Microsoft's open sourcing everything. We have ASP.NET Core.authentication.OAuth. This has a few providers, not quite as many as ASP.NET Security OAuth, but it's getting there, and it's working really well. And then for OpenID Connect, we're going to use ASP.NET Core Authentication OpenID Connect. It's a little confusing until you know how dynamic OpenID Connect works, because instead of taking a bunch of URLs, it takes an authority, which is just the domain that you're trying to log into, and then it knows where to go for the discovery URL and then gets the URLs for you. But the documentation around that's a little sparse. So yeah. And it assumes the discovery level of the provider. So if your OpenID Connect provider does not have discovery, they just have core, you're better off just using OAuth with them at that point. So let's look at code instead of talking about code. So I didn't live code because reasons. Okay. So what I'm going to show you is my startup.cs here. The main modules that we're going to look at are ASP.NET Security, OAuth, GitHub. And then we've got, where'd my Facebook module go? Huh, neat, it's not in there. Well, I've got Facebook in here as well. So in my startup, nothing much. I just have Builder add my secrets so I can use .NET Builder or .NET user / secrets, which is pretty great, actually. It's a really handy native module to be built into your platform. I wish Node had something close to that. I mean, we have .env, but still, that's pretty cool. So in configuration, basically, I used the default ASP app, so I'm going through a lot of bootstrapped code here, but here's where we start working. First, I'm going to say I'm authenticating by cookies. So normally with JWTs, you send them as part of a header and not as part of a cookie, but in the past 10 days, I found out .NET really likes cookies, like really, really, really likes cookies. So okay, we're going to use cookies this time. Cool. I'm configuring my OIDC here, but I'm going to be using this in a different application. I just want y'all to know, like I said, instead of accepting several different things, it's accepting an options.authority, and that's set to accounts.google.com. So it knows where to find the discovery URL based on that and can move forward from there. So here is where we're at for this application. So we've got our use cookie authentication, and then I've got use Facebook and use GitHub. So with Facebook, that's through the ASP.NET Core OAuth library. They have Facebook and Google. And then the GitHub authentication is through the ASP.NET Contrib security OAuth library. That one was contributed. And then, so I'm going to go into my terminal and OAuth samples. Cool. I have to pose like this or it'll crash. Okay, cool. Now, Chrome. Cool. Localhost would help if I could type. That's why I don't live code. Being dyslexic is ridiculously hard to live code. Yeah, just that tidbit of information. Okay, I'm going to hit login, and I can see Google, GitHub, and Facebook. I'm going to show GitHub and Facebook, and then I'm going to show y'all Google in a separate application. Awesome. Okay, so one thing is, when you try to do OpenIDC through this particular demo, it gives you a bad cookie, and then you have to clear it. Otherwise, it won't let you log into anything, which is why I have it in a separate application now. Anyway, GitHub. Great. It broke all of them. Okay, cool. So, much like the other presenters today, I have managed to take a demo that I've practiced 50 times and crash it. But in an ideal world, I would have clicked that link, logged in as NodeBotanist on GitHub, and it would have sent me back here and said, hello, NodeBotanist. Same thing for Facebook, but I'm pretty sure that's, nope, yep, of course not. So, I'm going to show you all OIDC. Good, I'm not cutting into Pokemon Go time. I will not be a corpse later today. Would help if I remember the name of the folder. There we go. .NET run. Yes? I have to know, how do you do that with your prompt? How do I do? Oh, my ZSH and the Agnostic theme and open source Pro font with Powerline. So that's how I do that. His question is, how do I make my terminal look like that? So, oh, great. Awesome, awesome, great. All right, let's try this. Cool. Errors. Just what I wanted. Yeah, I guess I do need to change it to project.js. Of course, this ran 5 minutes ago, but, you know, it was... All right, let's find 1.1. No results. Cool. Oh, that's because I'm not in the right folder. All right, cool. Project.json. Oh, wow, all of these are 1.1, so let's switch them all back to 1.0. Probably because I forked the ASP.NET Contrib security library and just ran their sample instead of, well, I modified it a bunch, but still. Yeah, you know. Well, I mean, it's open source. That's kind of the point, right? .NET Restore. Come on. Come on. Yes. Okay. Now .NET run. Cool. No, I'm not reporting it. This file cert.pfx. Okay, cool. All right. Oh, you know what? I know this runs in one place, so I'm going to move. Security? Is that what it's under? There it is. Security. Yep. Come on. No, I don't want Azure this time. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Always have a backup folder. I love how I'm getting applause for it running. That's how good this day is going. Good job, me. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to log into the NodeBotanist account. Demo worked! Yes! Okay. So this is my OpenID Connect profile. You can see a picture, you can see things like my name, IAT and EXP are JWT claims, and IAT means issued at, and EXP means expires at. So as a provider, I'll know, or as a consumer, I will know, hey, this token will no longer be available for this provider after that timestamp. So that's how OIDC works. And the best part is when you use any OIDC provider, they all provide these same fields under these same names. So if you're trying to aggregate a bunch of user data from a bunch of different social platforms, you can use OIDC as a way of saying, hey, guess what? I already know where that stuff is. So yeah. All right, back to my slides. I have 2 minutes. I mean, I can do this because I have like 2 slides left. Learn use some authentication and identity for great good. OpenID.net is the official site for OpenID Connect. There also might be an OpenID Connect playground coming out in the next week because I'm running late on my code. But just keep an eye out for an OpenID Connect playground, much like the OAuth 2 playground. Someone's working on it, I hear. GitHub.com/ASP.NET/security is where I got the GitHub extension, and it has a lot of providers that are contributed by the community. And then JWT.io to learn more about JWTs. If you go to the introduction page and play the video, it's going to sound awfully familiar, probably because I wrote it. Thank you for listening. My email is cass@auth0.com. My username is NodeBotanist just about anywhere. Yes, even Pokemon Go. The slides and the code, once I fix it, will be available at this particular URL. And then if you want to check out more about Auth0, we're at auth0.com. We're sponsors, so I get to say this. We're hiring a developer evangelist. We're hiring some engineers. Come talk to me. My business cards are also stickers, and I put a bunch of sticker business cards back there. Feel free to get in touch with me. If you have any questions, too, about OIDC or OAuth, or I'll attempt to address your questions about .NET Core to the best of my ability. Maybe I'll learn something, too. And as Carl Sagan is indicating, y'all are awesome. Have a great lunch.